Welcome back, guys, on my YouTube channel. Today I find myself in Segula, a technical training center where all the different brands come here to do testing, a bit like the one we have in Italy in Nardò. And we are here to test the brand new Suzuki DR-Z. But now, with no further ado, let's get changed and I'll start this morning with the Supermoto. Today I'm gonna talk to you about them. They are 25 years old. In 2000, the Suzuki DR-Z was introduced on the market, and probably even Suzuki didn't expect all the incredible success this bike had, which created a new segment, the segment of the dual sport bikes. In 2008, actually in Europe, they stopped importing them, and this bike was only sold in the US and in Australia until now, when Suzuki announced the return of the DR-Z in Europe with this brand new model. People have been really excited on this bike because at the moment there is a big gap. If we compare the adventure bikes and the enduro bikes, there is a gap in the middle, so you don't have any vehicle that can be sort of a bridge towards off-road riding, and this is what the Suzuki wants to be. The DR-Z has kept its essence. In fact, the frame has changed, but the geometry remained almost the same. Same for the engine. Some upgrades to the electronics have been made on one side because it's needed in order for the bikes to be homologated for the Euro 5 Plus regulation, but also to help even more the amateur rider, because, for example, we have the traction control with 3 different levels, we have ABS, and here with me you see 2 bikes, because even though the project of the DR-Z is one, it created 2 separate models that share most in common, and they have just a few tweaks and differences, which I'll explain to you now. First of all, the Supermoto has the same suspensions as the Enduro, but the travel has been reduced of 20 millimeters on the front and on the rear. The brake discs are larger, and we have 17-inch wheel on the front and on the rear. Also, the gearing ratio is slightly different because the Supermoto has 41 teeth on the sprocket and the Enduro version has 43 teeth. This difference is because how the engine is used in Supermoto and Enduro Dual Sport is a bit different, so you want a bit more responsiveness when you're riding off-road. Other difference, you can see the color is different. The ABS on the Enduro you can deactivate it on both front and on the rear, whereas on the Supermoto you can only deactivate it on the rear. Something that really everyone will appreciate is that the DR-Z kept its essence, it kept its style. In fact, when you start riding it, it feels like you're riding an old school bike, but this is something good, is something wanted, because you want a bike that is easy to handle, that has long intervals of servicing. In fact, you have a service interval every 6,000 kilometers. The engine is very smooth, so with also the 3 different maps, you have A, B, and C, starting with A, that is the most aggressive, B, the standard, and the C, I would more describe it like a rain map, and this gives every different rider of every different level the possibility to really get the good feeling and have a good sensitivity on the bike. Furthermore, another important aspect is comfort. In fact, if we go on the adventure bikes, they're very comfortable but bulky and heavy. We go on the enduro bike, a lot of power, maybe too much for a newbie, and zero comfort. This is a way in between. In fact, the seat is larger than a normal enduro seat and the foam is softer, so you can go also on relatively long rides. The fuel consumption consumption I tested was around 17 kilometers per liter, so not too bad. It doesn't make a lot of noise because it has lots of restrictions. It has 2 restrictors in the exhaust, which I believe if we look at the weight, we have 151 kilograms, the wet weight of the Enduro, and 154 kilograms for the Supermoto, because clearly has different wheels and different brake discs. When riding this weight, you can't really feel it too much. Even when we went in very technical sections in the sand with ruts under the forest, the bike was always easy to handle. And one thing that stuck in my mind was how well balanced the bike was, how the masses were nice and centralized, because even in the ruts you would barely put out your legs, so that meant you had a very good balance in the change of directions and on the technical sections. Well guys, let's speak on how this bike goes, because I'm really excited. I always looked forward to the reintroduction of the DR-Z in Europe. If we have to compare it to other bikes similar to this, we would only have the CRF 300L and probably the upcoming 390 Adventure or Enduro by KTM. Even though you can't really compare it to the CRF 300L, because this has quite a bit of more power, but also ergonomically, like the chassis and everything is a much different bike. I believe this is really the dual sport dream for many riders. And when I speak about dual sport, what I mean is a bike that needs to be easy and accessible to everyone, even for anyone that wants to approach off-road for the first time. In fact, I believe this is the ideal bike if you have never ridden Supermoto or Enduro to go with the DR-Z400, because you have enough power to have fun, but not too much power to have to be an expert to ride it like an Enduro bike, or have, you know, the technique to ride an adventure bike off-road. So this sits really in between. Let's start with the triangle of foot pegs, seat and handlebar. I found this bike to be extremely comfortable. Both the Enduro and Supermoto, you sit and you just feel you're ready to go. I'm tall 183 centimeters. The only small downside is maybe when you're standing up, you feel the handlebar a bit low, but generally when you're riding, also the riding position it brings you to keep is very centralized on the seat. And this is because all the masses are well centralized and also the center of gravity is pretty low. This means that even if this bike weighs 151 kilograms, so much more than an Enduro, but much less than an adventure bike, when you ride it, you have a more similar feeling to an Enduro bike. In fact, it's not that you feel that big of a gap. You feel it more power-wise, because with 38 horsepower, sometimes you would want more, and I'm speaking from an expert point of view, whereas for the amateur rider starting off, this is more than enough to have fun. One thing I need to say is it's very interesting how the throttle response is really immediate. As soon as you open the throttle, you feel the bike, you know, pulling. Then after this first part where it jumps, then there's a bit of flat section of the map, and this in all 3 maps. And then when you want to go, you know, full speed, you can reach 130 kilometers an hour. You'll be in 5th gear and you'll be quick in 5th gear. In fact, if I had to do a modification to this bike, I would be interested in placing the Supermoto 41 teeth sprocket on the Enduro, because I believe that makes you use the gear lever less, because you're changing gear a lot of time. I know everyone wanted the 6th gear. I wanted it too. It didn't come. The explanation from the Suzuki engineers is that in this way the bike is a bit more reliable, because if you put 6 gears, clearly everything has to be shimmed down, you know, it has to be made smaller to fit in the same casing, so it makes it a bit less reliable. The feeling when you're changing gear is really good. It's always precise. The gear goes in easy. Same with the clutch. The clutch is 25% softer compared to the previous model, and for me it just feels feels so soft that I have a hard time understanding how a cable clutch can be this soft. I really enjoyed it, but at the same time, being soft, you have a good progression. Today we were testing with Moto doing drifts. You know, the clutch is really fundamental when you're doing drifting, and you could have a really good feeling. Same goes from the brakes. The Nissin brakes, I just love them. They're so precise, and you have such a high sensitivity where you're able to pull the lever and also brake on the pedal, exactly getting the brake power you want. And throughout the day, especially when we were trying drifts and so using the rear brake a lot, it never missed a beat. It always kept the same progression, never varied. For me, this is crucial on any motorbike, because we know if we have the right brakes that give us a high sensitivity, give us confidence, then it's easier, you know, to also push and do turns faster and just have fun. The engine, super smooth, super easy. I must say, I'm considering buying this bike because I really enjoyed it, and I think it's a bike that lets you also do some long transfer sections. Like, I would never use an Enduro 450 to go maybe from home, drive 100 kilometers, go out with friends on the trails and come back home. With the DR-Z, I feel I could do that. One modification I will make in case I buy this bike is I'm gonna change the exhaust, because the exhaust has two restrictors, makes very little sound, but I'm not looking for the sound, I'm more looking for the performance. Making a full exhaust also shorter and just more free will give it more power. And I would also drill some holes in the airbox, because the airbox feels it's too close, and it has the only ventilation coming here from the rear fender, which doesn't bring that much airflow into the filter. For sure, it will keep your filter more clean. But yeah, if I had to find a downside, is the also access to the air filter.
Because you remove the side panel, inside you have the keys to take down the bolts in order to remove the other plastic and then access the air filter.
So it doesn't take long, but it would have been nice just to have, you know, a quick release, open, and you can change the air filter. The thing I'm appreciating most is that Suzuki really wanted to keep the essence of this bike, really wanted to keep the history and the character of this bike, and I believe it has managed to do so. Aesthetically, they made it much more modern. It reminds me a bit of the RMZ, which to me was a futuristic bike. Now it's been the same on the market for, I believe, over 10 years, but still it looks good. And that's the feeling I have with the new DR-Z, that you can leave it in the garage for 4 or 5 years, take it out, and it will be a bike that will be still very pleasing when you look at it. Between the yellow for the Enduro and the white for the Supermoto, for me, there's no choice. Suzuki is yellow, and even if I went with the Supermoto, I would put the yellow plastics. The fuel tank is 8.7 liters, not that much. For sure, we wanted to have a bigger tank option, maybe as an accessory, and I believe that aftermarket brands will definitely make a bigger tank for this bike. But if we look at the fuel consumption, I was getting 17 kilometers on average out of 1 liter, so doesn't use a lot of fuel. The suspensions on the front and on the rear feel very soft, especially the first section, and this is a good thing, because when I sit on a bike, I want to feel the suspension starting, you know, to move, because in that way, when I go on the small bumps, it will really absorb them well. Luckily, it has a long travel, because on the front it has 280 millimeters and 290 millimeters on the rear. So to reach the end of the travel is difficult. I mean, you have to hit stuff really hard or some really big bumps. Here in the forest, with all the ruts, with all the bumps, and with all the trees, I hardly bottomed out. On the Supermoto, I would make it more rigid for sure, because it feels it moves a lot. If you thought about racing this bike or riding it fast, for sure you want a bit more rigidity for it to be more precise when you enter turns. Just a big downside here during the test is the tires. We tested the bike with the OEM tires. That's the first thing I would definitely change, because in the soft sand, when I would go in and try and be aggressive, the front end would tend to understeer. here, but that is because of the tire, not because of the geometry of the frame, because that feels great. It gave me a lot of confidence. In fact, one interesting test we did here was we did a whole loop of very digged up track, all in the forest, very tight with big ruts and some steep uphills, where the goal was not to put our foot down, and most of us managed to do it. So that's an interesting aspect, because it means the bike is very well balanced, and so when you're riding it standing up, you feel good and you feel you can really move around the bike with confidence. Speaking about the engine maps, I went basically always with the A map. I tried the gravel traction control. For most people, I think it's a good setting, the G traction control, because it's not that invasive like on other bikes, so it lets you drift a bit. Last but not least, I like the attention to details. You see how there is this exhaust protection that covers most of the exhaust. This means that when we were riding also the Supermoto just with jeans, we would never feel the heat on our leg. The muffler stayed like the previous generation model, is very long, very exposed, but they added this black plastic that not only protects you from the heat, but also protects more the exhaust. Another small smart detail is the passenger foot pegs, because compared to other dual sport or off-road bikes, that would be the first thing you remove. Here they're so compact, so small, that you don't really feel the need to remove it when you're riding. I truly believe that the new Suzuki DR-Z is dual sport excellence. That's why I'm considering buying it, because I enjoyed it. You ride it like an enduro bike, but it's not an enduro bike. It's something, you know, in between adventure and enduro, but the fact that you can ride it almost like an enduro bike means you can go on very tight trails and do things you wouldn't be able to do with most of the bikes on the market. Now, the price is maybe the problem. 9,700 euros in Italy for the Supermoto, and the Enduro is a bit too high of a price if we compare it to the other dual sport bikes like the KTM 390 and the CRF 300L. It's true, this is a completely different bike. This is really more similar to an enduro and has, in my opinion, more capabilities, but it's a big price gap that I believe will divert many people on other options. Let's see if in the future they will make some special sale. Well guys, that's all for today. Let me know what are your thoughts. Let me know if you already own a Suzuki DR-Z, and if you're thinking about upgrading or considering this bike. Keep in mind, this is a dual sport bike, so if you're looking for performance, you should go more on an enduro bike. This is if you're looking for an extremely versatile bike to have as a daily drive, to go in the forest, even in tight trails, but also use in the city every day. Let me know in the comments if you have any other questions, and be sure to subscribe to my Instagram, to my YouTube channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Ciao!